Hey everyone, this tutorial explains how I put together the Taylor Bubble by Children's Corner. It's a very neat bubble, it's completely lined, and the casing is just genius. Seriously, I love this pattern. So to begin, you'll need to cut out your pattern pieces. One of the great things about Children's Corner patterns is they aren't netted, so you don't have to trace them out. Now I had to trace mine since Audrey is so tall for her age, so I combined the 3-month size with the 9-month length, yes. But anywho, if you're in proportion, you don't have to trace it. It's pretty great. So regardless, you'll have 2 back and 2 front. Both of these are full cut on the fold. And if you want to embellish your bubble, this would be the time to do it. I decided to add some flower embroidery work with some buttons to mine, and this is on the front of it. I've also seen people do a row of lace down the middle of the front or across the bodice area. Whatever your heart desires, you do that. It's sewing, you do you. So you'll first sew one of the side seams together, and it doesn't matter which, just pick a side seam and sew the front to the back right sides together, and then you'll iron that seam open. If you'd like to add piping, go ahead and do that now. You'll have to clip the curves as needed so it'll lay nice and flat. I clipped the first curve and then I started sewing, and then I would clip the additional curves just before I sewed them on my machine, and that made it easy to know where to clip since it's kind of hard to maneuver beforehand, if all that makes sense. And I clipped the corners twice. One clip where the corners stopped on one side of the shoulder strap, and the other clip where the corner started again on top of the strap. If all that makes sense. Goodness, my words I feel like just fail me sometimes, so I'm glad you have a visual. You can see that I'm clipping the next corner just before I sew it. And when you're sewing the piping, be sure to sew right along the stitches of the piping, or maybe a 1/16 of an inch inside those stitches. This means you'll be able to follow those stitches later on, and I'll explain that better when we get to that step. So I did the piping on the top and the bottom of the bubble, but again, this is completely optional, and I've also seen where people take their piping like up into the crotch, how I'm showing here, but I just took mine straight across. Again, it's sewing, you do you. Now I took my lining pieces and put them right side together down on front of my back and front pieces. This makes it obvious which seam should be sewn since you'll sew the same seam. I hope that makes sense. Once I sewed that seam on my lining and ironed the seam open, then I could pin the front and back pieces to the lining piece, right sides together. And I did take the time to pin it all the way around the front areas, into the shoulder straps, underneath the arms, and I pinned the bottom legs and crotch areas too. Then I used the previous stitches from where I sewed the piping onto to know where to sew these seams. Now if you didn't use piping, no worries, that's actually just easier for you. Just try to keep a consistent seam allowance. I think the seam allowance is 3/8 for this pattern, but it might be 1/4. Check your pattern. When you get to a corner, you'll need to put your needle down, lift your presser foot, and turn your work so you can continue sewing. Now clip all of those curves and trim up the corners of the shoulder straps as well as the crotch area. This will make it less bulky, so when you turn your bubble right sides out, you can work those straps into nice neat points. And I just use my scissors. I know they make a tool, but I don't own it, so I just use my scissors, and then I pressed everything really well with my iron. Okay, so we are almost done here, and this is where things get really clever. You'll need to match the sides that are still open right side together, and I found that adding a few pins here were helpful. The idea is that you're going to start sewing from the lining side, continuing around to the good side of the bubble and back to the lining side, and this will leave a hole in the lining side. So I'm showing here the bubble after I've done that sewing, and you can see my good side is completely sewn and the lining side has a hole in it, and this hole needs to be big enough to get your hand in it. I hope all that makes sense, and go ahead and iron that seam so it lays nice and flat. Now you need to put in the elastic. Cut pieces the length stated in the pattern, then you'll make your casings. So if you're making this bubble for a boy, you'll make your casing right at the bottom of the legs, but if you're making it for a girl and you want the ruffle look, then leave a space as I'm showing here. The more of a space, the longer your ruffle will be. Regardless of gender, you'll go back and sew a top to the casing. I use 1/4 inch wide elastics, and my casing is just over 1/4 inch, maybe it's about 3/8 of an inch. Then you can put a safety pin on one of your elastic pieces and use the hole opening in the lining as your axis to threading the elastic through the casing. you'll see I'm just pushing that safety pin through the casing, being careful to watch the end of that elastic. Then I sewed the elastic end down, leaving about a 1/4 inch hanging out from the other side so the stitches don't rip through over time. Then I continue to push the elastic through to the other side of the casing, and I sew that down in the same manner. After repeating the process to the other leg, and then you can stitch the whole of the lining closed. And the way I did this is I double threaded a needle. Basically I have both ends of that thread going through the needle. You can see there I've got both ends. And what that allows you to do is just to pick a spot at the bottom of that hole in the lining, and then you're gonna loop your needle back through that thread, and that allows you to tie onto your fabric without making a knot. It's pretty clever, right? Anyway, so then what I did was I went from one side up maybe a 1/4 inch or so, straight across to the other side, up another 1/4 inch or so, straight across to the other side, up another 1/4 inch, straight across to the other side, up another 1/4 inch, and I just continued this process. I just like this better than whip stitching because you're able to hide all those stitches, and when you look inside your bubble, it's not gonna, scream at you that it's been sewn up by hand. So anyway, once I get to the top, now the top is a little different because I don't know how to hide a knot once you're at the top. So what I did is I went through it once just to kind of tack it down, and then I went through it again to make a loop, and then I put my needle through that loop twice and pulled tight, and that made a knot. And then to hide those ends, I just found whatever spot, you can see here, I just found whatever spot like between the lining and the good fabric. I'm just putting my needle through there so it's not catching on the other side. You gotta be careful it doesn't catch on the other side. And then you kind of pull a little bit on that thread to make it taut, and then cut it off with the idea that now it's shorter and it's just going to disappear between the two pieces of fabric. And I really hope that makes sense. But you can see here, it's just, all you can see is the knot. You can't see the end of the thread. It looks pretty clean. I haven't even ironed this, and it already looks pretty clean. So I was happy with it. And there you have it. This is what your bubble will look like. So I decided to put snaps on the bottom using the snap setter, and I have a video on how to use that I'll link below. I also used the same snaps for the snap closure, but you could use buttons instead. It's sewing, you do you. I'm a big fan of using the snap setter for the crotches these days. Now that I actually have a baby, I'm overusing buttons for crotch closures. It's just so easy to just kind of rip the snaps open as you're changing the diaper and put them back together. They're very hardy, and unless I was using delicate fabric, I go towards my snap setter. Anywho, like I said, you do you. So Audrey is 4 months old now and is in the 90th or 95th percentile for her height, and she's average weight. So that means I combined the 3-month pattern with the 9-month length. Actually, the 9-month length is a little bit long on here. It's maybe an inch or so longer than it should be, but I figured I'd get more use out of it than using the 6-month pattern. All the instructions are the same regardless of what size you use. I just show her in the finished garments, and I give you her sizing to try to make things easy for you if you're trying to size it for a particular baby. Hopefully knowing her height and weight and whatever is helpful for you. Oh my words, I just get so tongue-tied sometimes. But anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. As always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.